They said the wind blew differently there, heavier, damp, as if every breeze came from beneath the earth, carrying a secret too rotten to be forgotten. Don Aurelio's orchard was unlike any other. Its fruits glowed even without sunlight. They grew without water and ripened when everything else around them withered. I remember the smell. It was sweet, too sweet, like spoiled meat dressed in sugar. The horses would freeze at the fence line. The children ran across the road without looking in. No one could explain how those trees survived in such dry, cracked soil where not even weeds would grow. But they did. Fast, ravenous. Then came the vultures, and after that, the bones. Today, no one steps foot on that land, not even in daylight, not even wearing a cross. I never quite understood when it began. The elders of the village said the orchard was already there when they were born, as if it had sprouted overnight all on its own on a forgotten bend of the Huetamo Road. But others, the ones who speak softly and avoid eye contact, swear they saw the first branches appear after a lightning storm in June of 1891. I was just a boy, but I remember the dark mud sliding down the hillsides like clotted blood. I remember the tallest tree, the one right in the center. It grew crooked, as if someone had buried it in a hurry, upside down. It grew at a frightening pace. One day it was a thin bush. The next week, its branches were already brushing the telegraph wires, and no one, absolutely no one, remembered planting it. Not the farm workers, not the former landowners. It was as if the orchard had chosen that patch of earth on its own, as if the soil there were hungry. There was something in that land that resisted time and reason. One afternoon I found my grandfather standing by the orchard, hat in hand, eyes locked on the twisted trunks. I asked what he was looking at. He said, "The trees are listening." I laughed, but then I saw his fingers trembling. He wasn't blinking. The silence there was different. It wasn't an absence of sound. It was as if sound had been swallowed by the roots. Even the insects avoided flying over it. Each tree leaned inward, slightly bent, like people in prayer, or bodies folded against their will. At school, the older kids whispered that the orchard had been planted on an old indigenous burial site. They said that during the colonial invasion, the last rebels were buried alive, refusing to kneel before the cross. Others claimed that during a terrible drought, Don Aurelio bought the cursed land for pennies and overnight ordered trenches dug, paying strangers who asked no questions. True or not, the trees grew too fast, too differently. One bore purple fruit, dark like clotted blood. Another, with a split trunk, produced something between a peach and raw flesh. No one dared to pick them, but no one dared to cut them down either. I remember the first time I entered that land alone. I was 12, dared by the others. "Grab a fruit if you're brave," they said. The ground made noises, not just the usual rustle of leaves or creaking wood. It was a wet crackling, as if something lived just beneath the surface. Up close, the trunks had veins that seemed to pulse. I felt sick. The air was still, yet I was sweating cold. I picked a small, dark fruit and ran. At home, my mother beat me. Not for stealing, but for the smell. She said nothing, just burned the fruit on the stove and cried. Over time, people began avoiding the orchard. The shortest road to town passed right by it, but most took the long trail full of rocks and thorns. They said if you got too close, you heard voices, sometimes crying. Some felt dizzy, nauseous, or forgot where they were going. One man tried cutting wood from the trees. He came home with blistered hands. Days later, he lost his fingers. The wood bled, not sap, but a thick, dark liquid that smelled like iron. No matter how much he washed, the stain stayed. That's when a group of farmers tried to destroy part of it. They arrived at dawn with axes, machetes, and a cart of salt. I watched from afar. The first tree fell with a heavy, muffled thud, like a body hitting the ground. Smoke poured from the stump, dense and dark, smelling like burnt hair. Still, they kept going. Then one of them screamed. Inside the second tree, they found teeth. not buried and grown into the wood as if the tree had absorbed a jaw. They fled, never came back, and the trees kept growing. From then on, no one touched the orchard again. It became a taboo, forbidden, but always watched. Kids who played too close were punished. Families left offerings at the fence, corn, flowers, even chicken blood. Always at night. Don Aurelio himself was rarely seen. They said he lived in a small house hidden in the back, but no one knew for sure. Some believed he had died years ago. Others said he only came out under a waning moon, always carrying a bucket. Once I tried to watch, climbed a hill, and he appeared. Moonlight touched his face, older than time, hollow eyes. The bucket, adrift, something thick, dark, falling in silence between the leaves. He walked slowly as if following a tune no one else could hear, stopped before the central tree and poured the contents at its base. The tree shuddered. I swear, its leaves rustled without wind. I ran, never went back alone. Don Aurelio vanished days later. No funeral, no goodbye. No one knows if he left, died, or became part of it. The house stood empty, but the orchard kept growing. Worse, the fruits multiplied. Some had near-human shapes. Others, when they hit the ground, made a sound like a skull cracking. One boy, curious, bit into a fruit. He lost sight in one eye, began speaking in tongues no one recognized. He lives alone now, twitching and whispering words from somewhere else. I don't know if anyone's dared to tell this story beyond Michoacán. Most would rather forget or pretend they never knew, but those born there carry its shadow, like a stain in memory. No matter how hard you scrub, it returns, in dreams, in smells, in sudden silences. The road still runs past that land, but no one stops. Even the weeds seem to avoid the soil. Time has passed, but the roots remain. And sometimes late at night I swear I hear a sound, not wind, something chewing. Don Aurelio arrived in Michoacán like a shadow no one saw coming. He wasn't from here, that much was clear. His speech was slow, accented in a way no one could place. Some said the south, others the desert, but truthfully he seemed to belong nowhere. He carried only a worn leather suitcase, a book with no title, and a gaze that never settled on anyone. He bought the land on a cloudy morning, paying with old gold coins, tarnished like they'd been pulled from a grave. The notary didn't ask questions, and the townspeople kept their distance, not out of fear, but instinct. No one knew where he slept. Sometimes he'd be seen walking the orchard before sunrise. Other times, standing still in the dark, listening to something from deep underground. The rare moments he spoke, every word came slow, deliberate, like each one carried weight. He never asked names, never smiled, yet something about him made dogs retreat. One child, found sitting beside him in silence, later said, "He told me things." She never spoke again. Rumors spread about notebooks filled with strange symbols, diagrams of bodies tangled with roots, numbers that made no sense. A maid once claimed she saw him burying things by hand every Thursday beneath the largest tree, sometimes jars, sometimes boxes that moved. When she tried to look closer, he sent her away. Not in anger, but pity. "You still have a soul in your eyes," he said. She left that same day, never spoke of it again, never left her house after sunset. His name was never on any record, no birth certificate, no last name. The town registry simply read, Aurelio, land buyer, 1891. But the priest once tried to visit, offer blessings, maybe break some unseen curse, but came back pale, shaking. He took leave from the church the following week, said that inside the house he felt something behind him. But when he turned, nothing was there. The smell was worse than fear, a blend of wet soil, burnt candles, and rotting meat. From that day on, the church closed early. No one tried again. Some thought he was an alchemist, others a sorcerer. A few claimed he'd come from a cursed monastery where monks went mad reading forbidden texts, but others whispered something darker, that Aurelio wasn't human at all, that he was a vessel, a servant of something older, deeper, something hungry. Theories came and went, quickly buried by fear. No one wanted the truth. because deep down, everyone knew if the orchard noticed you, something inside you began to rot. One night during an eclipse, a military man from Morelia arrived with 2 aides, said they were there to investigate disappearances. Only one man walked out of the orchard, silent, face warped by terror, found wandering the road, mumbling, "He feeds what lives beneath." He never spoke again. The officer and the other man vanished. And Don Aurelio? He went on as if nothing happened, picking fruit with bare hands the next morning, humming a melody, not quite a song, more like a ritual. People still whisper about the night the moon turned black and no one could sleep. Something moved in the orchard, not wind, not animals, something deeper. Witnesses, who remain unnamed, swore they saw Don Aurelio kneeling naked beneath the central tree, arms buried to the elbows in the soil. Around him eyes, small, red, watching. The lantern light died on its own, and the rooster never crowed. No one knew where he came from, but worse, no one knew how he understood the land so well. He spoke of seasons like reading a body. Knew when the soil was thirsty, when the moon would demand something, when the wind would carry voices. A farmer once heard him say during a brutal drought, "Drought is for those who eat from the surface. I plant where flesh becomes root." The farmer never forgot that line. A month later, he buried his wife. Flowers bloomed in his yard overnight. During Dia de los Muertos, people avoided the orchard. But the scent that drifted from there wasn't just flowers and wax. It was incense mixed with blood and laughter, soft, childlike. A drunk musician once mocked it, playing outside the gate. He vanished that night. Days later, his flute was found, stuck in the ground beside a tree no one remembered planting, and from its trunk something oozed, drawing flies. Since then, no music is played there, not even whistling. The last time I saw Don Aurelio, it was a fleeting moment, golden twilight stretching his shadow across the orchard. He seemed to smile, but not with his mouth. The kind of smile you feel in your gut, cold, unwelcome. A raven perched on his shoulder. He didn't flinch, just looked my way, and blinked, for the first and last time. That night I dreamed I was buried alive beneath damp roots, woke up with dirt under my nails, and I never returned. It was in September 1891 when the silence changed. First, a goat vanished, then a woman's dog from a nearby house. Everyone blamed wild animals, jaguars maybe, or coyotes. But when little Manuelito disappeared, an 8-year-old boy gathering firewood near the orchard, the air turned heavier. His mother called for him until nightfall, lit candles, screamed his name. It echoed, but never came back. They found only his wooden toy cart, leaning against the fence. The wood was wet, but not from rain. It was thick with something salty and sweet, like the tree had wept for him. Then came Clara. Young, a seamstress, engaged to a farmer. She walked that road every morning, passing by the orchard on her way to work. One Tuesday she never arrived, not at the shop, not at home. Her fiancé went looking and found her handkerchief snagged on a thorn near the fence, stained with blood, but there were no signs of struggle, no footprints, nothing. Only one branch inside the orchard, bent as if something or someone had passed through. At the tip, a flower bloomed, one no one had ever seen before. When they tried to pluck it, it wilted instantly, and the fence began to creak on its own. More cases followed. A traveling cloth merchant vanished. A sick child, carried to the healer, disappeared along the path. The healer's body was found, dismembered in such a way that even vultures kept their distance. Stranger still, no blood on the ground, as if the earth had swallowed it. The town grew quiet. People prayed more, and the trees blossomed like never before. Heavy fruits hung low, nearly falling on their own. No one dared pick them. They seemed to watch. And sometimes at night, something moved among the branches, something not made of wind. What terrified people most was the precision. The vanishings happened like clockwork, every 7 nights. Sometimes a child, sometimes an elder, a wanderer, Always someone alone, always someone who walked too close. Villagers started marking days on their walls, counting down. And when the cursed night came, the whole town went still. Doors locked, windows boarded. Even the dogs grew restless, howling like they knew. One hurled itself at the orchard fence, desperate to get in. No one dared stop it. It disappeared into the trees, was never seen again. But in the morning, tufts of fur were found caught in a branch. During those months, I dreamt of roots. I don't know if it was fear or some kind of warning. In the dream, I walked beneath the ground, tunnels of dirt and flesh. I heard whispers, broken phrases, voices calling names I recognized, the names of the missing. One night, I saw Clara in my dream, trapped in a tree trunk, eyes wide, hollow. She whispered, "I'm alive, but not for long." I woke up screaming, with dirt in my mouth. Strangest of all, my feet were dirty, as if I'd walked outside. But I knew what stained me was inside. The town marshal tried to act. He formed a patrol, armed, to guard the orchard on the next night of the cycle. 4 men, dogs, lanterns, rifles. I saw them enter. I saw the lights dance between the trees. Then, silence. Only one lantern was found the next day, still burning, resting in torn-up earth. One of the dogs returned, limping, hairless, its eyes milky white. The marshal? Never seen again. After that night, no one patrolled the orchard. The village made an unspoken deal. Don't touch it. And maybe, just maybe, it won't touch you. In time, the disappearances stopped, but only because no one went near anymore. The old road was abandoned. A new path was carved behind the hill. Don Aurelio's land became forbidden ground, but no one dared call it cursed out loud. Naming fear makes it grow. Still, at night, the village breathed heavier, as if each home carried the weight of something buried just meters away. And the orchard kept growing, slowly but always, as if, even without new victims, something still fed it. Memory, regret, promises made and kept in blood. A blind old man named Matteo swore he heard footsteps between the trees, soft but steady. "Not an animal," he said. "It's people, or what's left of them." Everyone laughed, until one night, Matteo vanished, and his guide dog with him. His cane was found planted upright beside one of the orchard trees, tied to the roots, the dog's scarf. After that, no one doubted Matteo, no one laughed, and no one went out at night, not even the drunks. Over time, people began to believe the missing weren't dead. They were bound, fused to the roots, the earth, the trees. Some fruits started to grow with strange features, bumps that resembled noses, ears, fingers. A farmer claimed he saw one smile. Another heard a tree whisper names in dead tongues. These things were told in hushed voices, behind closed doors, because knowing too much made the orchard curious, and it liked attention. Silence became protection. Even now, children born in that village learn early. Don't point. Don't stare too long. Don't dream of trees. I still wonder what would have happened if someone had acted early on. Burned the trees, closed the land, driven Don Aurelio out. But back then, no one dared. And maybe that says more about us than the orchard, because fear has roots. And when you live with it long enough, it becomes part of the landscape. You pretend it's normal to have a piece of land where people vanish and trees bloom, alone, hungry, silent. The fruits began to change after the third disappearance. Before, they looked ordinary, smooth skins, round shapes, even color. But over time, they began to shift in unsettling ways. Some grew so dark they looked black. Others became translucent, revealing seeds inside that pulsed slowly, like tiny hearts. One looked like human skin. Another dripped a thick golden liquid that never dried. The most disturbing part was the sound. Yes, some fruits made sound, a faint crack as if something inside had bones, and sometimes a sigh, simple, quick, almost human. Once, a man named Ezekiel tried to harvest one. He was a medicinal plant researcher, stubborn, a skeptic. He believed everything had a scientific explanation. He entered the orchard cautiously, carrying a machete and a cloth sack. He chose the smallest fruit from an isolated tree, cut the branch, but the fruit screamed. Not like an animal, not like a human. It was a sound, old, warm, alive. Ezekiel collapsed, vomiting. He said the sound pierced through his ears and stabbed into his chest. He ran, speechless. For months he only drew circles and scribbles on scraps of paper, until he died, without a single mark on his body. I saw one of those fruits up close, one early morning. Someone had left it on my doorstep, wrapped in embroidered cloth that smelled of burnt incense and rust. The fabric was wet. Inside, the fruit pulsed like it was breathing. It had blue veins and red stains that moved, migrating across the skin like insects under flesh. I used gloves to pick it up, put it in a bucket of ice. The moment the cold touched it, I heard a crack. It split open. A dense, sweet smoke spilled out, making me cry, not from pain, from fear. And when I tried to throw it away, the bucket was empty. Some said the fruits were offerings, that the orchard produced them as payment or as a warning. Others believed the fruits were the missing people, transformed into food for something we could not understand. An old priest once confessed that he'd bitten into one by mistake. He said it was too sweet, not like sugar, but like memory. He felt his mother's voice, the scent of childhood, a kiss he never received. After that, he didn't speak for a week. When he finally did, his voice had changed, deeper, slower, as if someone else was speaking through him. On the hottest nights, the orchard gave off a smell of fermentation, like spoiled wine, and the air grew thick, as if the space between the trees narrowed by its own will. The fruits glowed, literally, a moist, living glow, like sweaty skin under moonlight. No one dared approach. But a local artist, fascinated by organic forms, tried to capture the fruits in art. He painted watercolors, charcoal sketches, even sculptures. He started selling them, but over time his pieces changed. The fruits appeared in works he never painted. The forms came fully formed, as if his hand was no longer his own. He tore out his own eyes. "I don't want to see what I see," he wrote, in blood. One day, all the fruits fell at once, without warning. A muffled boom rippled through the village, like something deep underground had broken loose. The trees shivered, though no wind blew. And then, the drop. Hundreds of fruits plummeted at the same time. Some exploded on impact, others cracked open. From a few came sounds, laughter, whispers, words in no known tongue. The elders locked themselves inside. The young stood hypnotized. A boy approached one cracked fruit, said there was an eye inside, and that the eye blinked at him. After that, the boy never slept again, and his parents began hearing whispers from under his door. The textures of the fruits grew stranger still. Some were dry outside but bled inside, as if hosting a living fluid. Others bore symbols, natural marks shaped like ancient runes. Scholars tried to document them, copy them, translate, but the symbols changed. What appeared in the morning had shifted by dusk. A linguistics student obsessed with the patterns spent months studying. He concluded the fruits didn't just have language, they had memory. Worse, they responded to his dreams. The day he wrote that down, he vanished without a trace. And a new tree appeared in the orchard, its branches shaped like fingers. The orchard ignored the natural seasons. It bore fruit out of time. Its cycles didn't follow moon or rain or sun. It grew in rhythm with grief, with loss. The quieter the village, the more it bloomed. After someone died, new fruits appeared by morning. Some bore marks from the deceased, freckles, scars, eye color, as if absorbing identity. People tried to destroy them, crushing, burning, but the stench was unbearable. It made them faint, and the smoke, thick, black, heavy. It rose, even without fire. What terrifies me most is how some fruits wanted to be found. They fell closer to the road, split open on their own, opened like mouths. One rolled to my door one morning. No broken branches, no footprints nearby, but there it was, dripping. Inside was what looked like a baby tooth and a note, handwritten, 4 words only: "You will sprout too." I burned the note, but the scent lingered for weeks. And ever since, sometimes I wake up with the taste of dirt in my mouth, even when I don't dream. What if the fruits are seeds, not of plants, but of stories, of wounds, of buried sorrow? What if the orchard is a mirror of who we are, of what we hide? Sometimes I think it grows because of us, that what feeds the roots isn't just flesh, it's memory. It's all the things we let rot inside, and there they bloom, with shape, with scent, with taste, impossible fruits, born from what should never have lived, but did, because no one dared pull the tree out by the root. Every time someone tried to understand what was happening in that orchard, something got worse, as if the very act of investigating was an offense. But the rumors spread anyway. Letters were sent to nearby cities, first to the diocese, then to the mayor's office in Morelia. Some came back, stamped, others disappeared. Eventually, a group of curious outsiders, journalists, maybe students, arrived in the village saying they would expose the truth. There were 5 of them, young, confident. They asked too many questions, laughed too loudly. On the first night, they camped near the orchard. By morning, 2 were gone. The remaining 3 left without looking back. One of them whispered to me, "Whatever lives there doesn't want to be understood." The church tried next. A young priest, zealous and naive, arrived from San Luis to exorcise the land. He came armed with crucifixes, holy water, and a kind of arrogance dressed in faith. He held field masses, prayed aloud before the trees. On the 3rd day, he said he was making progress. On the 4th, he vanished. All that remained was his breviary, open to a page about serpents and roots. The bishop who sent him refused to discuss it further. He ordered the orchard left in silence, and that the name Aurelio never be spoken again. Some lands belong to God, he said, others to what God has forgotten. Then came the politicians, deputies, colonels, even agricultural engineers. They arrived with maps, clean boots, and skeptical eyes. They spent 3 days taking soil samples, jotting down measurements, collecting leaves. On the 4th day, they began arguing. On the 5th, one of them broke down in tears, collapsed near a tree, sobbing like he'd just lost a loved one. He was carried away. The official report filed it under unexplained rural anomalies. No one was ever sent again. But under the table, the whispers grew louder. "The orchard is alive," they said, "and it's listening." Strange visitors began appearing around the village. People no one recognized, staying in the most isolated homes. One man in a dark coat spent weeks watching the orchard through binoculars. A woman filled thick notebooks with sketches and then burned them. There was also an old man who played harmonica at the edge of the land, like he was trying to speak to the trees. One by one, they either left or vanished. None left notes, no belongings, only sensations. The village always felt heavier after each of them disappeared, as if something from them had been absorbed. One of the few records that remained came from a photographer. We never knew his name. He said he heard about the orchard in a bar in Guadalajara and came to document it. He arrived alone, spent 3 days setting up his plate camera at dusk. On the 4th day, he fled the village, eyes wide, clothes caked in mud. He never spoke a word, just left behind his negatives. When developed, the missing villagers' faces appeared in the fruit, but not like faces drawn or grafted. They looked out from within, through the skin, as if the fruit was a window of flesh. The images were burned, but I saw them, and I haven't slept peacefully since. Eventually, the rumors crossed the mountains, reached distant cities, spoken over tequila shots and broken promises. The Devil's Orchard, they called it. Some believed it was an indigenous curse, others a wound left behind by the conquistadors. And then there were those who claimed Don Aurelio was one of the horsemen, planting living gateways across the earth. The villagers stayed quiet, because we knew the more people talked, the more the trees seemed to shift, as if the sound of stories fed them, as if curiosity itself fertilized the roots. There was one night when 3 excommunicated priests arrived. They came on foot carrying black candles and bones, said they were going to seal the land. They performed a ritual for hours, chanting in forgotten tongues. They used salt, cemetery soil, lamb's blood. At dawn, the orchard looked the same, but darker. The trees seemed taller, the fruits heavier. The 3 men were last seen walking into the orchard's center. They vanished into the leaves. Days later, 3 new trees appeared in that very spot. Thin trunks, but bent, like people kneeling. Many tried to find a center, a master root, a buried heart beneath the soil. They dug during full moons, using blessed tools, whispered prayers, desperate promises. But every hole was filled by morning, as if the ground had healed itself. A retired teacher once said, "You're not digging, you're feeding." No one touched the soil after that. The idea of maps, of science, of logic, faded. The orchard wasn't meant to be understood. It was meant to be feared. Still, I tried. Years later, as an adult, I returned with a tape recorder. I wanted to hear what the trees said, if they said anything. I lay at the edge of the fence, surrounded by dry leaves, waiting. I recorded silence, heard the wind. But when I played the tape back at home, something was there, deep, buried. A voice, low, uneven. It said my name, repeated it. Then came a phrase I can never forget. "Now you are Route 2. I burned the tape, but the sound remains with me. In the nights when the wind dies and the world seems to be listening, maybe our mistake was trying to explain, to label, to measure. Some things only exist as long as they remain mysterious. The orchard refuses to fit inside reason. It is instinct, hunger, time accumulated, and maybe we, humans, are what feed it, with our fear, our guilt, our curiosity. Because true horror doesn't live in the answer, it lives in the question that should never have been asked. The truth came with the rain. After months of drought, the sky opened in an October night, not with relief, but with violence. Lightning struck like it was trying to rip the ground apart, and that's what it did. One of the orchard's oldest trees collapsed, torn from the earth by the storm. By morning, the village woke to a strange sound in the air. It wasn't birdsong, it wasn't raindrops. It was a hollow sound, repeating, like drums under the soil. I went there with others. The fallen tree had exposed a deep pit, and inside it, bones, dozens, hundreds, in all sizes. Some still had pieces of clothing. Most people wanted to run, but something kept us there. Like the earth was pulling at our feet. One man went down with a rope, dug through the mud, pulled out a wedding ring. It belonged to his sister, missing for 4 years. Another found a pendant, a sandal, a tooth. It wasn't just a grave, it was a record. Each bone seemed carefully placed, aligned, like roots. And the deeper we dug, the more recent the bodies were. The oldest, dry and brittle like dust. The ones near the surface, still soft, still red, still breathing. The police were called, but they took 3 days to arrive. By then, the pit had already sealed itself. The rain didn't stop, wild, unnatural. The soil moved like it had a will of its own. The fallen tree had sprouted again, a shoot, a branch, a new trunk growing silently overnight. Those of us who saw the pit were questioned. Some lied, others tried to speak, most went mad. One man who helped dig was later found licking dirt by the roadside, whispering numbers. Another tried to peel the skin from his own arm, saying, "It's not mine anymore." The images from that day haunt me still. The smell of the open pit was the same as the fruit. Sweet, wet, sickening. But the worst part was the silence. A silence so thick, even the raindrops seemed swallowed. No birds, no wind, no footsteps, just our hearts, pounding, like they were warning us. We had gone too far. Someone tried to photograph the bones. The camera broke. Another's film caught fire. A priest tried to pray. He vomited blood, and still no one left right away. Because we knew that what we saw explained everything. And at the same time, nothing. What we witnessed wasn't just death, it was transformation. The tree roots had wrapped around the bones, grown through them, but more than that, it was as if the bones had become part of the tree, as if they'd been digested, absorbed. Some branches sprouted directly from skulls, others from ribs, trunks twisted around femurs. The fallen tree didn't look dead, it was remaking itself, breathing, growing. The sap was dark, thick, like clotted blood. When one man touched it, the branch cut him, on its own, with a dry snap like a mouth, biting. After that day, a new kind of fear spread. It wasn't fear of the unknown anymore, it was fear of what had been confirmed. Because now we knew the bodies were there, that the fruit had names, that the orchard really was fed by human flesh. But the most terrifying part wasn't that. It was the realization that the orchard chose. The missing weren't random. Each of them had something in common. A secret, a wound, a guilt. It was as if the orchard only accepted those already rotting on the inside, and we began to look at each other differently, as if wondering, who's next? They tried to seal the area, build fences, even burn it. Nothing worked. Fire died on its own. The wood wouldn't catch. Cement cracked. Fences were swallowed by the roots, as if the land was aware, as if it knew they were trying to shut it down. Eventually, they gave up. The government buried everything, declared the zone a contaminated natural reserve. No documents were released, no photos escaped, but everyone knew. And those who knew changed. They grew quieter, heavier, like they had seen something that wouldn't stay behind, something that kept living inside them. A meeting was held days later with the village elders. I was invited. One of them, the oldest, said something I've never forgotten. What grows from death carries death wherever it grows. He asked that no one speak of the orchard again, that the story not be passed on, that we let the earth sleep. But it was too late. The tale, even silenced, had already rooted itself elsewhere. One traveler carried the story to Veracruz, another to Mexico City. It spread like the trees, quietly at the edges, until someone, someday, decides to listen again. A child, daughter of one of the men who saw the pit, began drawing trees with eyes. In all of them, bodies hung from the branches, not like fruit, but like wood. The girl's face changed when she drew, as if it wasn't her anymore. Her voice, too, lower, rougher. She spoke phrases no one taught her, names no one remembered. Her parents fled the village. Years later, I heard she died staring at a tree in another state. The strangest part? That tree wasn't from there. No one recognized it. It had grown from nothing, alone, and it bore fruit, even without soil. And me, I still dream of the pit. I dream I'm down there, among the bones. The roots wrapping around me, pulling gently. It doesn't hurt, but it's not comfort either. It's a warm feeling, almost maternal, like the earth is whispering, "You belong to me too." I wake up sweating, chest tight, ears filled with silence. A silence that pulses, that calls, that grows, because the orchard might be buried, it might be forgotten. But hunger never sleeps. They say every attempt to destroy the orchard leaves a mark, not on the land, but on the soul of the one who tries. Over the years, some dared to defy the silence. Angry youth, skeptics, curious outsiders, all met the same fate, ruin. One of them, a man named Ruben, came with a chainsaw. He laughed loudly, calling it all old men's superstition. He cut down 3 trees before noon. By sunset, his body was found inside his own well, folded in a way no body should bend. The chainsaw was at the bottom, still running. The water, red. No animal ever drank from it again. Others tried fire. They brought kerosene, torches, bundles of straw, lit the edge of the land with chants. The flames rose, danced for a few minutes, then vanished. No wind, no rain. One by one, the men involved began to suffer strange afflictions. One went blind in a single eye. Another lost all his teeth overnight. The last was found asleep in the middle of the road, wrapped in fine roots growing from his mouth, nose, and ears. The doctor said it wasn't possible. The roots were alive, and they had grown from within. The curse didn't always strike fast. Sometimes it waited, sank in. A farmer who dug ditches near the orchard's border began forgetting words, first names, then verbs, then even his own language. One day, he simply stopped speaking. He sat on his porch, staring at the ground, as if listening to something below. When he died, they found under his pillow a handful of dark, wet earth, with that unmistakable scent of the orchard, and his tongue was gone. One group tried to encircle the land with symbols of protection, salt crosses, prayers, blessed nails in every post. It lasted 3 days. Then the symbols began to change, on their own. The crosses twisted into strange, curving shapes made of branches that grew overnight. The salt melted, the nails disappeared. The wooden stakes woke each morning covered in black lichen, dark as rotting meat. On the 10th day, the group gave up. One left, the others stayed, but without memory. They wandered the village like sleepwalkers, talking to the trees, or to something within them. The orchard didn't attack out of rage, it defended itself, like a living thing protecting its boundaries. The more people denied it, the more it grew. The more they called it legend, the more real it became. Every act of defiance made the ground pulse louder. There was a woman who tried to write a book about it, collected testimonies, interviews, nearly 200 pages. On launch day, she vanished. All they found was the final printed copy. In the epilogue, one sentence handwritten, "I didn't write the ending." Some began to believe the orchard made trades, that it returned those it took, partially, but changed. One boy vanished for 2 days, then returned, naked, his skin covered in dry leaves stuck like scabs. He remembered no names, no parents, but he knew the trees, each one, pointed at them gently, said, "That one was a child, that one weeps." He was institutionalized, but he never slept, eyes open, whispering in Latin, Greek, and a language no one could name. His room remains empty, but sometimes nurses say the scent of wet earth still appears at night. There's a lesser-known legend, one rarely spoken aloud, that the orchard chooses a guardian, someone not devoured, but changed. A man or woman who understands the cycle, protects the ground. No one knows if Don Aurelio was the first or the last. But there are signs that others have taken his place, people who live in silence, reclusive, their eyes always watching the trees. One of them was seen walking at night, naked, with a branch growing from his chest. The branch bloomed, and from its flowers, blood dripped. The curse spread in subtle ways. It wasn't always death, sometimes it was decay, slow erosion of the soul. Families who lived too close began to waste away from the inside. Their eyes dulled, hair fell out, words grew sparse. A baby was born with roots where veins should be. It didn't survive, but the coffin, found empty the next morning, the grave soil, moist, breathing. Beside the tomb, a sapling had sprouted, small, fragile, but already carrying a familiar scent. Even those who only watched from afar carried something afterward, a weight, a whisper. The curse wasn't just death, it was infection, a living memory, as if the orchard planted pieces of itself in others' minds. A warehouse worker who swore he never came near began dreaming of leaves growing between his teeth. He woke tasting sap. Then one morning, he vanished. No one searched. They already knew where he was, not the who, but the where. And that was enough. What remained of all those stories wasn't courage, it was silence. The village learned that trying to fight the orchard was the same as offering yourself to it. The only way to survive was to forget. Avoid the name, avoid the eyes, avoid the ground. But even silence has limits. And I, who try to stay quiet for so long, I can't anymore, because I feel the curse doesn't end when the orchard stops growing. It continues when you begin to tell the story. Today, anyone passing through Michoacán won't find the orchard. It's not on maps, there's no fence, no sign. The road has shifted course. Even those born here sometimes forget exactly where it was. But the emptiness remains, a patch of land no one farms, where even weeds hesitate to grow, where sound doesn't enter. You can be just meters away and still not hear your own footsteps. The wind dies before reaching it. Birds veer away mid-flight. It's like a reverse echo, a hole where sound and memory are swallowed, and what's left is only silence. Children grow up learning not to speak about it. Don't play there. Don't look too long. If you hear your name coming from the brush, pretend you didn't. These warnings are passed down in hushed voices, generation after generation, as if even words could wake something. At school, the topic is never covered. History books skip the year 1891. No teacher mentions it, no test asks. And yet, everyone knows. It's a knowing that doesn't need saying. It lives in how people lower their eyes when someone mentions trees or fruit. The church prays but never names. The All Souls' Day Mass runs 1 minute longer than usual, always on the same day, always at the same time. No one explains why, but everyone observes the silence. Even the bells ring differently, slower, muffled. They say that's the hour the main tree fell, and also the hour it was reborn. Some parishioners avoid kneeling at the front pew. They say the wood creaks differently. Others say not to bring too many flowers or fruit. The last time someone left an apple at the altar, it sprouted overnight, and no one could pull it out. The elders hardly speak. They sit on porches in the town square staring at nothing. Their eyes carry a weariness deeper than age, like they're listening to time walking backward. Some move their lips without sound, just chewing silence. One woman once told me, "Every word we swallow is one root that doesn't grow. If we quiet everything, maybe it starves." She closed her eyes after saying that and never spoke again. Not to me, not to anyone. Even public records seem to have been touched by that silence. Files go missing, pages tear themselves, names vanish. A historian came from afar, trying to reconstruct the events of 1891. He stayed for a full month, read journals, letters, council notes, but in the end, he gave up. Said the documents didn't add up. Dates contradicted each other. People were mentioned who never existed, or existed centuries earlier. He concluded it was a localized temporal distortion. I call it something else. Land that protects itself by forgetting. The orchard's former entrance is now an empty lot. Someone tried building a house there. The walls went up, but every night they heard footsteps on the roof, voices in the plumbing, and a breathing coming from the floor. They sold it at half price. The next buyer never moved in. The house rotted before the furniture arrived. Moss, the color of death, covered the walls. The windows fogged on their own. And one day, with no storm, no wind, the roof collapsed. Inside, there was only earth, dark earth, like from the bottom of an old grave. At night, those who walk the old road say a chill rises from their feet to their neck. Even in summer, even with no breeze. It's not the kind of cold that gives goosebumps. It freezes from within. Some say they hear noises, not footsteps, but roots shifting under the asphalt, creaks, snaps, a pressure from beneath. A woman whose car broke down there swears she heard voices calling her name from the trees. She ran on foot to the nearest gas station. Now she carries a cross in her pocket and never drives alone. The orchard became a forbidden name, a whisper between neighbors, a quiet warning in conversations. No one says tree, fruit, or root without thinking twice. Some families invented codes, the gray place, the quiet ground, the curve that never turns back. And still, sometimes children dream. They draw trees with eyes, ask questions no one wants to answer. A girl once said she dreamed of Don Aurelio. "He doesn't speak," she said, "but he looks inside me." After that, she stopped eating fruit. Any fruit, not even bananas, or apples, or juice. I've thought of leaving, of forgetting everything, starting life far from here. But the problem isn't just the place, it's what stays with you after the road, After the distance, the sense that something is still breathing behind your neck, that silence isn't absence, it's waiting, and that any moment now it could return, the hunger, the root, the name. Because some stories don't end when time passes. They end when the last person who remembers stops speaking. And that's why I write this now. Because maybe the only way to break the cycle is to speak, to tell, to write, to give a name to what tried to steal our voices. The silence of Michoacán is not emptiness, it is excess of pain, of memory, of buried horror, and maybe, if you listen closely, deep in that silence, you'll hear something breathing. Even after all this time, the orchard still lives in whispered mouths. The village changed, new roads, new schools, but the land where the orchard once stood remains the same, untouched, suspended in time. Sometimes children, too young to know the story, come back from there saying they saw someone among the trees, but there were no trees, no people, just a patch of weeds. One girl said an old man in dark clothes and white eyes offered her a fruit floating in his hand. She said no, and since then she hasn't spoken a word. Some swear they hear voices in the leaves, even when there's no wind. Not screams, just conversation. Long murmurs like forgotten prayers. Some hear their own name, spoken like by a loved one, or a name that belonged to the dead. The sounds come from under the soil, like roots whispering through dirt. One woman said she dreamed her dead husband called her to pick mangoes. He hated mangoes in life, but in that dream, he smiled. The next day, she was found asleep, leaning against the old orchard wall, holding a rotting fruit in both hands. Drivers avoid the old road. Those who pass report strange things. Radios go static at the same bend. Headlights dim, compasses spin. A truck driver once said that, while passing the curve where the orchard used to be, his truck felt lighter, as if something had left it. At the next town, he opened the trailer. Every box was open, every crate empty, nothing broken, nothing forced. As if whatever was inside had simply decided to leave. There are legends of trees appearing elsewhere. Not many, just one at a time. Always in places where death, abandonment, or deep sadness have settled. They grow fast, bear fruit no one recognizes, and strange things happen nearby. Animals fall ill, children draw obsessively, people vanish for minutes or hours and don't know where they went. Scholars call it cursed soil migration, others expanded plant memory. But here, we call it inheritance. The orchard didn't stay. It spread its roots. Even those who left still feel the pull. I've received letters, emails, messages from people born here but now far away. They say they dream of the orchard scent, of the taste of earth. One said he hears knocking on his wall every time he tries to forget the story, like memory itself is knocking, saying, "I'm still here." Another found unfamiliar seeds in his coat pocket. He didn't remember putting them there, but there they were, dry and smelling of overripe fruit. A doctor who grew up here but moved to Guadalajara wrote an article about collective trauma. In the final paragraph, he mentioned the orchard without naming it. He wrote, "There are places on earth where time doesn't heal, where fear takes root, where horror becomes routine. These places persist because we are still capable of fearing them. And while fear exists, the land remembers." The article disappeared a week later. The author vanished from the hospital where he worked, and a tree sprouted in the building's courtyard. That same week, sometimes during town festivals, someone hums an old song. No one knows where it came from or who taught it, but everyone knows it. It speaks of trees that dance at night, of fruits that cry, of roots that seek your heart. The children sing it without fear. The adults only listen. And at the end of the song, there's always a strange moment, brief, where sound seems to pull back, as if the air itself is listening, waiting. The last time a child sang it alone, she fainted, and when she woke, she only spoke to plants. Even today, if you ask someone in the village about the orchard, the answer will always be the same. "I don't know what you're talking about," but watch their eyes. the twitch in their mouth, the silence that follows, because they all know. Everyone carries the shadow of the story, even if they try to walk away from it. It's an unwritten inheritance, an invisible root. And sometimes you realize the orchard was never there on the land. It was inside those who lived, or live, or listen. I don't know if the legends are true, but I don't know if what I lived was a dream either. The orchard existed, and maybe still exists, not as a place, but as a presence, as an echo. And every time someone tells it again, writes, speaks, sings, it grows. Because a legend is that, a tree no one planted, but that insists on blooming, especially when we try to forget. And if you've made it this far, listening to every word, feeling every silence, maybe the roots have already touched your feet. You don't need to believe or understand. Just remember, some stories don't die when they're silenced. They bloom in those who heard them. For years I thought the orchard was just a curse, a sick land, a mistake buried in the past. But now I wonder, what if it wasn't an anomaly? What if it was a mirror, a reflection planted in the earth, showing what we try to hide? Because everything that happened there, the silence, the violence, the hunger, the forgetting, didn't come from the trees. It came from people, from us. The earth only swallowed what we gave it. Slowly, I realized the orchard fed on what humans hide the most: guilt, pain, secrets. Not just flesh, but memory, everything that rots quietly inside us. A swallowed scream, a forgiveness denied, a regret whispered too late. And when those things pile up, they ask for roots, they ask for shape, and the earth patient offers space. The orchard wasn't the curse. We were. It was the answer. We were the question. Many believe horror lives in the supernatural, ghosts, curses, monsters. But what I saw was something else. The face of greed, of denial, of fear to face who we really are. Don Aurelio didn't make a pact. He just stopped denying what lived inside him and let it grow. That doesn't justify it or forgive it, but it explains. Because every orchard begins with a seed, and every seed comes from within. We were the ones who chose to forget, to silence, to pretend it never happened, and that pretending created the emptiness, a space where anything can grow. When no one's looking, the dark expands, and when it grows, it wants to be fed. The real tragedy wasn't just losing people, it was losing truth, killing the story before it could teach. And maybe that's why it came back, not to haunt us, but to remind us. Sometimes I think the orchard wasn't the only one, that there are others, smaller, hidden, quiet, in every town where pain was buried, in every street where memory was erased, invisible trees growing from what we left behind. You can feel it, that unease when passing a place where nothing happened, but everything feels wrong. Maybe something was buried there, not bones, but choices. What scared me most wasn't what I found in the soil. It was what I found in myself, the part that wanted to look, to dig deeper, that felt relief when I saw the bones. Because finally, there was an explanation, a reason, a villain that wasn't me. But what if the villain isn't outside? What if the true horror is our ability to get used to the unthinkable? The orchard isn't a fable, it's a mirror. Because humans have this terrible gift of growing forgetfulness. We bury what hurts, trim what bothers us, pretend it's not ours, but nothing stays buried forever. The earth listens, holds, and one day answers. What grows there isn't the land's fault, it's ours, and we keep feeding it. Maybe that's why the orchard was never destroyed, because it's not there anymore. It's here, in the words, in the fear, in the silence between each sentence, in the memories you had while listening to this story, in who you thought of, in what came back to you. The land may be gone, but the roots keep growing inside. And if there's any lesson in all of this, it's this: pay attention to what you bury, what you silence, what you pretend to forget, because nothing truly dies when someone still remembers, and what's left unnamed, unforgiven, unheard, will always find a way back, Maybe as a dream, maybe as a tree, maybe as a story. I tell you this because maybe, now, part of the story belongs to you too, not as a curse, but as a living memory. The orchard exists as long as someone listens, and maybe by speaking it aloud, we're not summoning it, we're healing it. The orchard grows from what we are, and it only changes when we do. If this story gave you chills, leave a like, comment where you're watching from, and share it with someone who would love to uncover this mystery, or maybe has already dreamed of trees.